welcome on in to the Third Round Reversal Fantasy Football Podcast. Brett Mallard here with you, along with Zach Malamud. Zach, the draft has come and gone, and now we have a ton of landing spots here for fantasy to discuss pretty much the entire summer leading right up in the draft season.
I was going to say, Brett, we had the nice post Super Bowl period where we wait till the NFL draft, and now we're in the season that we really love the most. I feel like, Brett, we get to talk all along the summer until obviously those fantasy drafts happen. But obviously with the NFL draft, a lot of rookies to talk about. So I'm excited.
Yeah, it's really good. It just kind of is that, like you said, it's that really awesome period where you just really are trying to dissect now, who's in the lead and what rookies are going to do really, really well. What rookies are not really in a great situation right now. And maybe their stock was very high coming into the draft, and now it's really not that high. And, they're kind of going to drop in drafts. We did see a lot of surprises, I would say, though, as far as the draft goes, especially early in round one. I think a lot of intrigue of whether there would be quarterbacks picked, whether it would be a wide receiver, where Brock Bowers would go, I think was a big question. Who was going to go line, whether there would be trades. There really weren't very many trades at all at the very top part of the draft, which was a little unexpected up until about the 24 hours right into it. There was a little bit of movement, the Jets trading down a pick with the Vikings, as they go up and get a quarterback. But, really not too many. The Chiefs at the very end of the round trade up to a receiver. But, yeah, it just kind of fell into place as, not a ton of movement like it was all drawn out to be.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we kind of saw teams hop around and nothing too crazy in terms of trades, I would say. Kind of a team saw a guy drop and they went up and grabbed them. So nothing as crazy as we were kind of expecting at the start of the draft. We were kind of expecting maybe a big move jumping up, team jumping up. We didn't get that. And I mean, that's okay. A lot of teams got the guy that they wanted. So it panned out for them.
Yeah. So today we're going to break down at least day one of the draft, which was round one. And in our next episode, we're going to break down, the second and third day. So the rest of the draft, because I think that we really want to deep dive here into these top guys. Obviously, there are going to be the guys that are dissected the most as far as their skill set, their landing spot, where they should go in dynasty drafts. All the people at the top of the rounds are going to be trying to figure out which guy they should get, whether they should pick a wide receiver, a quarterback, etc. We're going to break it all down for you. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. Give us the thumbs up. Check out some of our previews on some of these guys before they had their landing spots as well. And then obviously next week, as we break down the second part of this NFL draft. But Zach, let's just jump right into it. We'll start out with the number one pick. It was, for I would say probably months already, concluded that Caleb Williams was going to be the number one pick. He shows up in his navy blue suit, and he said that was on purpose. And obviously, he is a Chicago Bear right now. Pretty good landing spot, obviously. Now that we do know he will be the guy, he is going to have a ton of talent right around him. I think that that's really important for a rookie. And listen, I think that it's going to be one of those offenses that is sort of built around Caleb Williams. And I think that that's really going to reflect on his fantasy value.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think what the Bears were able to do this offseason, they brought in DeAndre Swift, they brought in Keenan Allen, they already have DJ Moore. I mean, what else can you ask for as a rookie quarterback? You got the system and all the players around him. So he's undoubtedly, Brett, the number one pick in a lot of super flex drafts in terms of quarterback. Obviously, there's a lot of discussion of people with Marvin Harrison Jr. But if they need a quarterback, it's Caleb Williams who you're drafting. The talent is there. I talked about him last week and a couple of weeks before that, where My one thing was I was worried about his upside. I think he can be a real solid quarterback, but I don't know if there's that pure boom potential when I look at Caleb Williams. And he could prove me wrong. I think the thing about Chicago is they have never really had that good quarterback. I mean, we talk about the weather being a huge problem. All of a sudden, they're building a dome now, most likely, Brett. Up in Chicago, it's difficult to play right on Lake Michigan, and it's hurt Bears quarterbacks for years. He's going to have to deal with a couple years without that dome, and we'll kind of see if that stadium plan comes to fruition. But for right now, great solid starting spot for Caleb Williams because of, like we said, all the guys that they put around him, and he should probably be right near the top, if not number one, in terms of those dynasty drafts that are coming up so soon.
Yeah, I think that, again, like you said, he's the number one pick or the number two pick, depending on what your needs are. And I think that that's really up to you. And you can't really go wrong with Marvin Harrison Jr., obviously. And you can't go wrong with having Caleb Williams. I think that both of them are going to be really essential pieces for a dynasty team. Obviously, you talk about the immediate impact. I think that a guy like Marvin, like he could potentially be a top 10 receiver, which is why I probably am putting him ahead of Caleb as far as just my overall rankings personally. But again, if you're a quarterback needy team, like I think that you can be thrilled if you're picking first in the draft this year and you have the opportunity to go out and get Caleb Williams with that offense.
Yeah, obviously there's the argument of in a single quarterback league, yeah, it's probably going to be Harrison that a lot of teams are going to go with. But if quarterbacks are the big thing in your league, it undoubtedly, like I said, is Caleb Williams.
Yeah, like I know our league, the team who's picking first, like they don't need really necessarily a quarterback. And so they're probably going to go out and get Marvin. Like, you can't fault them for that because, again, talking about a guy who could be a top 10 receiver. So yeah, the debate can continue though as we get closer to draft season when we figure out, if anybody goes down with injury or whatnot, and what these rosters actually look like, potential trades, anything like that. But it was, pretty quickly, a dispute of which quarterback would go second overall. The Washington Commanders took a guy to Topgolf, and then came out that Jayden Daniels was upset with the situation. Then it comes out later on after the draft that they actually pulled him aside and had a bunch of one-on-one time with him. And they really got to like him and he really got to like them. And so match made in heaven and the smoke screens were real. Washington goes and takes Jayden Daniels to be their quarterback at number 2. Zach, I really like this landing spot for Jayden Daniels. I think that it really gives him an opportunity to be the quarterback that I know you think he can be. Being able to use his legs, obviously, we talk about like the receiver room, and it's not amazing. But at the same time, picked up a tight end in the draft, so that was kind of nice. They picked up Luke McCaffrey over in the third round, and so we'll talk about him on the next episode, and Ben Sinnott also. But as far as it goes with their running back room, I think that that's really important. They have 2 guys who can catch the ball out of the backfield, Austin Eckler, Brian Robinson. Really, really think that that's going to help Jayden Daniels as far as those checkdowns. When he can't get it out or when he tries to run and there's really not a lot of room, he can dump it off to a guy. I think we'll be seeing a lot of that. I think we'll be seeing a lot of run option, the read option, I mean. And so, yeah, I think that this is an excellent. Obviously, we talked Cliff Kingsbury. I think that's the biggest proponent here. We saw what he was able to do with a guy like Kyler Murray. I think Jayden Daniels has some of the similar skill sets, as far as the running goes and being able to throw on the run. And I think that that's also going to, basically translate into fantasy value. So, yeah, I really like the pick. I think that it's going to be a really good opportunity for him to be himself.
1,000%, Brett. I agree on everything you said. I think we talked about it last week, a couple weeks ago, and for me, he's the quarterback with the highest ceiling. I think he can go the furthest of any of these quarterbacks, and that stands out from what he was able to do in college in the SEC. Even though it was only a couple of years, he transferred from Arizona State over to LSU. In those couple of years, man, he is just a baller. He is really, really good. And you mentioned the addition of Cliff Kingsbury to really settle things down there as the OC in Washington. I mean, Kyler Murray, you also mentioned what he was able to do with Kyler, top 12 in all 4 seasons with Cliff Kingsbury in terms of fantasy. Kyler was up there every single year, including his rookie season. So that's a real bright spot there. But on the ground, plus in the passing game, this man can do just about everything as a passer and as a runner. So with the weapons they have next to him, and Eckler and Robinson in the backfield, plus the guys out wide and McLaurin and Jahan Dotson, like 2 speedy guys that if you just throw a deep ball, they'll go get it. He's in a really, really good spot. I really like this landing spot for Jayden Daniels.
All right. So, yeah, I think he's going to probably be right up there at the very top of the drafts as well. I'd probably put him right there in that 3rd pick, right around that. Obviously, we talk about the potential of picking a receiver at that spot if you need it. Could obviously see Neighbors, Odunze, kind of preference, and they're kind of neck and neck, I would say. But Jayden Daniels is probably 3rd, if not 4th pick of the draft.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so jumping to our next guy, it was Drake May. And Zach, I think that this was, kind of an iffy spot here, whether the Patriots were going to trade out or not. Whether they actually were in love with Drake May or if they were just kind of putting it out there. We saw a lot of rumors about the New York Giants potentially trading up to try to get him. Comes out afterward, Minnesota and the Giants both put major offers in. Patriots say no. They take their guy with the 3rd pick. Listen, I think that Drake May is a good quarterback. I also think that the cupboard is really, really thin for what we have right now as far as offensive weapons. We have Ramondre Stevenson and Antonio Gibson in the backfield. They picked Jalen Polk. They have Pop Douglas, KJ Osborne, Kendrick Bourne, but I don't know. And of course, Juju. How could you forget Juju with the amazing year that he had last year? I don't know that he's going to start right away, Drake May. I think that, they sort of had that in the writing. They picked they signed Jacoby Brissett. They ended up picking Joe Milton as well. So they have 2 guys they can develop behind Jacoby Brissett. I think that he's going to be the starter right away. And then they'll kind of let Drake May come in, week 8, week 9 sort of a thing. So as far as the dynasty value goes, I think this was not a great landing spot for him for right now. I think that eventually, if the Patriots build themselves around him, then it could potentially be a good one. Obviously, having a guy like Ramondre Stevenson or an equivalent of Ramondre Stevenson is a pretty essential thing for Drake May to be able to run. And, all he can catch them out, sort of what we see in, say, Detroit on the pass, play action and be able to throw it. I think that that's going to be what's going to make him successful. I don't know that that's going to come right away, though, as far as this goes. So, yeah, like I have been saying for a little while, depending on the landing spot, he could drop in drafts. I think he will drop in drafts now based on his landing spot. He's probably right in the middle towards the end. I'd say the back half, top of the back half of these, super flex drafts. So in 12-team leagues, probably like that 7th or 8th pick range. I don't see him going much higher just because I don't see the initial impact coming in.
Yeah, that's fair. I'd say probably that 6 or 7 spot around there is where I'd probably draft a guy like Drake May in Dynasty just because, I feel like with a lot of the other guys, they're starting right away. I don't know if that's going to happen in New England. We kind of have to wait and see because they may like him and they may say, all right, yeah, we're going with it. We're starting them right away. We've seen Drake May, and it's kind of unlikely that they do that. I think that's the question mark, though, is as we get closer to training camp and things like that, where is New England's heads at in terms of, all right, are they going to rush him in and say, all right, he's ready to go? We're full believers in him, or they're going to have Brissett there and just have a bridge there and kind of develop Drake May right behind him. So we'll wait and see on that. But in terms of right away, right when he got drafted, you said, all right, we'd probably push him down a couple spots because of the landing spot and because they may have that bridge right in front of them with Brissett to just hold things over for a little while, Brett.
All right, so our next pick, the 4th overall pick, Arizona. There was very little rumors about them trading, and rightfully so. It seems like they had channeled themselves in on Marvin Harrison Jr. for quite a while. Just the thought of not taking a quarterback when they were able to obviously come out and say Kyler's our guy at the end of the year. I think that was really important, and they kind of stuck to that as far as, they were kind of all in on Marvin Harrison Jr. throughout the entire process. It never was going to be a tight end, obviously. It never was be any other wide receivers. I think that wasn't going to happen. The only potential was that they were going to trade out, and they seemed very adamant that they didn't want to trade out. They wanted to go out and get the best guy that they possibly could, and obviously they're getting a pretty good one here. I think that, like I said at the top of the show, I think Marvin has the opportunity here to be a top 10 wide receiver right from the get-go. He's the number one option. He also, I think, of the big three receivers, Neighbors and Odunze, I think he had the best landing spot also, because I think that this is the slam dunk number one guy, and there's really not a lot of competition for targets outside of it. I mean, competing with Greg Dortch and Michael Wilson for targets. Obviously Trey McBride's going to get his, and that's okay. I don't know that as far as the receiver core, like there's going to be any of these rookies that has as big a target share as Marvin Harrison Jr. does. I think that this is going to be one of those huge target shares, and Kyler's just going to kind of keep looking for him pretty much every time he drops back.
I was going to say, we can talk about the landing spots, everything. This guy's been ready since the beginning of his senior year his junior year in college, just moving along. All right. Just like any other day, he could fit into an NFL offense right away. He's 21 years old, and we're talking about a guy who could be top 10 for the next 10 years, Brett. Like, he's just right there. He has that potential. And like I said, even forget like the people around him and everything. He's got the best quarterback of that group. And it's hands down not even close. Like Kyler Murray, although, yeah, people have their problems with Kyler, you take him in a landslide over Caleb Williams and Daniel Jones. Like, it's not even close. I think in terms of what Marvin can bring to the table, he's clearly the number one option in Arizona. But the fact that he has Kyler Murray throwing him the ball, and we've seen what Kyler in his good seasons is really able to do. I mean, we saw his connection with DeAndre Hopkins. Imagine that now with 21-year-old Marvin Harrison Jr. and what he's able to do on the football field. So just the fact that he is with a quarterback like Kyler, that's a dangerous, dangerous duo. And you may say, oh, well, defenses are going to double him. That won't matter. They doubled him all the time when he was at Ohio State. This is nothing new for a guy like Marvin Harrison. I think he'll be perfectly fine. And like I said, pairing up with Kyler, not too bad of a landing spot there.
Yeah, and again, I was having a conversation over the weekend where we were talking about Marvin Harrison Jr. And just SEC and Big Ten schools versus the rest of the schools in all of college football. And like, this guy has basically played against all of the top teams that have all the top rookies. Most of the guys that were drafted were SEC or Big Ten schools. This guy's been playing against those for years. And so, listen, he's been obviously in a system that has worked for wide receivers. We've seen some pretty big wide receivers come out of that school in the last couple of years. He seems like he could be the biggest one of the wide receivers, which is nuts. I love the talent. Obviously, you have to respect it. But yeah, the landing spot's pretty awesome. Like you said, Kyler is no slouch. He got a little bit of a bad rap as the team didn't do so well, but then he got hurt. Obviously, you can't really affect the record of the team when you're not playing. But yeah, I think that this is one of those reclamation projects with Kyler Murray, and we sort of saw that when he came back. The ability for him to hit the targets on the run. We obviously saw Trey Bride become one of the top tight ends in the entire league down the stretch. And so, yeah, I think that this is an awesome spot for him, for Marvin, and looking forward to seeing the success that he has pretty early as a pro.
Definitely.
All right, so we jump to the next pick, which was Joe Alt. And so we will fly over the 5th pick to the 6th pick, which was the New York Giants. They got shut out of the big 3 quarterbacks. And there were a lot of rumors that they were going to be in on J.J. McCarthy. That ends up being a little bit of a smokescreen. And they go out and they take Malik Nabers. Zach, I think that at the time that this pick was made, to me, I was like, okay, well, he's going to be with Daniel Jones. Not an amazing spot. They're picking a quarterback here. Maybe eventually he gets that quarterback within the next year or two. Obviously, I think Daniel Jones is on like 4th or 5th chance that he's actually had. I think it's his 4th chance that he's actually had where there were rumors they would get rid of him, and he ended up getting the job. I saw a rumor today that Drew Lock might beat him out. I don't think that that's the case. I think Daniel Jones is your quarterback. That said, I wasn't thrilled with the spot at first. I think that after the weekend has ended and we now know sort of what's going on, listen, the Giants are operating under the assumption that Darren Waller is not going to be there this year. I think that's really, really big news for Malik Nabers. I think that, having Waller there, if Waller was there and he was playing, I think that Waller was going to be the number 1 target and Malik Nabers was going to be a 2A/2B with Wan'Dale Robinson and Jalen Hyatt. And I wasn't really sure who was getting the ball. Darius Slayton, who was getting the ball? They all sort of are similar receivers. And so as that speed. And so I didn't really know who was getting the ball. Now I think, they go out, they pick Theo Johnson. Darren Waller he's retiring. I think Nabers is the number 1 target. And that sort of has changed just in the last couple days, my opinion. So, yeah, I think that he'll be successful. I think that you're probably taking him in the middle of the round, probably right after that tier quarterback, and obviously Marvin Harrison Jr. But to me, he's right there. And I think he'll be pretty successful now based on the fact that, they lost, obviously, Saquon Barkley. And so their top running back right now is Devin Singletary and Matt sitting behind him. So I think that there's the opportunity that they're gonna be down in games. They're going to have to throw the ball. And, yeah, listen, they got a good pass rush, and that's all well and good. But if the offense isn't holding up, you're going to be down in games, and you're going to have to throw the ball. I think where the Giants sort of find themselves, and they're going to have to figure out a way to get it into the number 1 receiver's hands. And that bodes well for Malik Nabers' owner.
Yeah, so 2 things on this. Obviously, if we were in a super flex that we're talking about, you'd probably put that first tier of Harrison Jr. and the 2 quarterbacks, Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels. I would say then tier 2, right after that, it would be the first 2 guys in my mind are Malik Nabers or J.J. McCarthy. And you kind of go, whichever one you feel you need. Whether you need a quarterback, then you take McCarthy. If you need a wide receiver, then you take Nabers. It's flip-flop right there. But they're right at the top of that second tier, the 2 of them, him and McCarthy. So in my mind, Nabers, the second thing I would say on him is you mentioned the Giants and the situation. I think he was probably close to being that number 1. Just because I don't think they have a talent just like him, like that's anywhere close to him. I think he's just clearly the most talented guy in any of those rooms. I would say about Neighbors, well, yes, it doesn't look great on paper that he's going to the Giants and, we'll have to pair up with Daniel Jones. But this offense kind of runs a short game kind of offense. It's all right. Maybe we'll throw it short this time. You don't really see too many deep balls from the Giants. Like, yes, once in a while. But Malik Neighbors, his thing is speed. And a lot of it comes after an early throw, he catches it, and then he just bursts. And he's gone. He's through the defense rather than just a deep ball shot. So I think in terms of that, the offense that Dable runs and how the Giants move the ball down the field, that I think fits Neighbors' play style, because a short, just a curl route, and he is gone if he gets the ball in his hand. So I think that definitely favors a guy like Neighbors.
All right, so let's jump into what was just the most mind-blowing pick I think any of us could have even imagined. So the 7th pick ends up being J.C. Latham to the Titans. Obviously, they miss out on Joe Alt, a guy that they seem to have channeled in on. And then the Atlanta Falcons are up. And to me, I thought there were a few options that they could have had coming into this draft. I thought that Malik Neighbors was number one. As I said, in my Madden franchise with said Atlanta Falcons, I'm going off right now with Malik Neighbors on that team. I thought that was an option. Obviously, it didn't become one because he got picked. I thought that Rome Odunze could have been a good option there as well. And the third option was trading down. I thought that the defense was going to go pretty early or wasn't going to go pretty early. And so they were going to get a good defender if they dropped. I thought that that was the route. Well, we find out that they don't really care about any of that, and they don't care what anybody on the outside has to say. They don't care that they just guaranteed $100 million in the first 2 years to a quarterback, and they go out and they pick Michael Penix Jr. out of Washington. Now, disclaimer, former Kirk Cousins fantasy owner over here, who I did get rid of before, I think it was 2 seasons ago. I love Kirk Cousins. I think Kirk Cousins is a great quarterback. I think that Kirk Cousins has a very, very high floor in fantasy. I don't know Mike Penix Jr. is going to take over for Kirk Cousins right away, because I think that the tools are right now there for Kirk Cousins to be successful in the offense. I think that he has a ton of weapons around him. Obviously, Drake London and Bijan are at the very top of that list. You can say, Pitts as well, and the success that he's had using tight ends, Kirk Cousins. But I think just from the get-go, he's going to have a ton of talent around him. They bring in Darnell Mooney. They bring in Rondell Moore. And so, obviously, Tyler Algier sticks around as well. I just think that they're going to be a successful team. They're not playing in the most competitive of divisions, as we saw last year. And right now, they seem to be the favorite, and they'll probably go neck and neck with the Bucs, my guess. But I also think that this is a young core that's going to be around for a while. And so to pick a quarterback at that spot, it almost reminds me of the Jordan Love pick, but also it's pick 8 in the entire draft. So yes, you want a succession plan in place. I totally get it. I get that from a million miles away, that you have a plan where you can have a quarterback ride it out here. Rookie quarterback learns from him. He takes over for 20 years. Then you can do the Favre to Aaron Rodgers thing to Jordan Love thing. I get it. 1,000,000%. I don't know that Michael Penix Jr. at pick 8 is going to help his fantasy value at all, because I don't know that he's going to get the opportunity right away, because I think the success that Kirk Cousins is going to have will help him. To me, that slides Michael Penix Jr. down my board to the very back end of the first round at most. I also think that there will be a lot of drafts where it doesn't go in the first round, where he slides even to the first, 5 or 6 picks of the second round. Just think that the opportunity that is in front of Kirk Cousins, the weapons, the money, all of it translates to Michael Penix Jr. isn't exactly going to get an opportunity right away based on what is set for Kirk Cousins.
Definitely fair. Definitely fair. And I've had a long and heavy 3 days debating with some of my buddies up here, Brett, about this situation. It's just gone on day after day that we've talked about this. So my stance, I'll keep it short and sweet. I think back to what you said about Jordan Love and the Aaron Rodgers thing, and yes, was Aaron very unhappy when that happened? Yeah, he was. That was also because Green Bay hadn't picked a weapon for him, I think, since he got there, or long before he got there. Like it was a bad spot already coming into it. What I will say, Michael Penix, there's only 2 quarterbacks ever that have had 4,500 yards or more in consecutive seasons in all of college football, in college football history. One is Michael Penix. The other is Patrick Mahomes. So I'm not saying he's going to turn out to be Patrick Mahomes. However, when they see talent, especially in this draft class where, we'll get to him in just a bit, that Bo Nix, who's a second-round talent coming in, is going 12th overall. Like, everybody's going to get their quarterback. So Atlanta said, we're going to get it. The thing about Cousins' contract is it's basically a 2-year contract. People are like, oh, well, it's 4 years. It's 4 years. No, it's a 2-year contract with then the third year he gets 10 million or so. But that's like the last 10 million. You get 60 something in the first year and 20 something in the second year. So it's really a 2-year contract, and they kind of figure things out in year 3. But Michael Penix, I've watched him in college all of this year, a really, really talented quarterback. And if he's in the right system, he can really work well. I think within 2 years, when those 2 years are done, he'll come in. And we're talking about weapons for the next 10 years. Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts, Drake London. So he's already set up there. Yes, Kirk can be great these next 2 years, but Kirk's 36 years old, coming off of a torn Achilles. So if he goes down, then they have Penix. They definitely handled it a lot worse. But I think if they told anybody at all, that they were thinking about it, they get trashed even worse than they were, because everybody would know about it and Kirk would disagree and everything. It would just be a much worse situation than it already is. If they did a good job of keeping it quiet, because it shocked everybody. And why not? They saw their guy and they went for him.
Yeah, a few things you said there. Number one, the contract. I agree with you. I think that it's a 2-year deal. Obviously, if he's successful, they're going to restructure it. They'll figure out a way to restructure it. They'll keep him till he doesn't want to play anymore, and that's how that'll go. Which is why I kind of pointed to the Jordan Love situation of how that sort of worked out. And they kept structuring the Rodgers contract on and on. Became this huge dead cap hit because of it. Sort of crippled the Packers as far as the cap goes from a standpoint. But yeah, I agree with you. As far as the skill goes, which is why I still have him as a round 2 pick, it's pretty good. It's like really, really good. He's very pro ready. There were only a couple pro ready quarterbacks. He was one of them. If not the first, he's the second most pro ready guy, I think. And so, yeah, awful landing spot, obviously, and stock down, because we're talking about a guy who could have went, if he had the best of landing spots, could have went at the top. Like if he went to Minnesota, let's say, probably is a top pick. Like he is in the rookie drafts, rookie superflex drafts. He's probably a top 5 pick. But based off this landing spot, again, he probably could slide into the second round in a lot of these drafts. That said, I think that, if you really go historically, I haven't done a deep dive in the numbers in the last year or so on it, but the hit rates on second round in rookie draft is not very high. It sort of starts out kind of high and then it tails off very quickly. So if Michael Penix is falling to you in the second round, take a chance. I think that a lot of those guys that are in the second round are short terms. We've seen a lot of guys like Tank Bigsby who just haven't panned out, and he was picked at the top end of the second round last year. I'd rather have the Michael Penix Jr. and play the long game, stash him on the end of your roster, and yeah, it's probably less of a roster spot for you for probably a couple of years here, but I think it's worth it. At the end of the day, it could be worth it. And when eventually he does get the call, because at the 8th overall pick, like he will get a shot to be their starting quarterback at some point. He's not just going to sit there for his entire career after being 8th. Like when he does get that shot, I think he'll be very successful. And so to me, I'm not passing up on him in the second round. I think that that's, a very good pick at solid value, even if you have to wait the time.
I was going to say, just sit and wait. Yes, he's 24, but I mean, most quarterbacks go till they're about 40 now. So you get 15 years of Michael Penix, 14 years. Doesn't sound all that bad to me.
Yeah, especially if you're one of those teams at the top of the draft. Let's say you go out and you pick a receiver at the top end of the draft, like you're going to have a quarterback sitting there for you. Let's say you pick a quarterback. Well, you could pick Michael Penix Jr. also, and essentially you have one going. If that guy doesn't work out, well, Penix, here comes Penix, like he's ready to go now. And the other guy plays out his rookie contract. Like I think that there's just more opportunity from taking a guy like him. Yeah, even with the waiting game that you might have to play.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so we jump right to the next pick. It was pick number 9. There was a lot of questions of whether the Bears were going to go line or if they were going to go receiver or if they were going to trade down. They end up picking the receiver, Rome Odunze. Zach, I think as far as the landing spot goes of the big 3 guys, this is the worst one. And the reason, quite simply, is it's very crowded. And so they have DJ Moore, they have Keenan Allen. I think that targets, at least from the get-go, are going to be hard to come by for Rome Odunze. I think they're also going to expect him to do a little too much and fill that role. We sort of saw it with Quentin Johnston last year. We're using him a lot in the run blocking. They were using him kind of ways that he shouldn't have been used, as far as as the slot guy and kind of making short routes as opposed to what he's used to. I think that Rome Odunze sort of falls into that role here. I think it's really just going to be about feeding these guys, these weapons. Obviously, they brought DeAndre Swift in as well, and so we're talking about even more targets that might come his way out of the backfield. And so, again, bad landing spot, great receiver. I think that Keenan Allen might not be there in a year based on his contract unless he restructures it. That's where I see this coming in.
Agreed. I think, this is kind of a 2 years, 3 years down the road. Like he'll be a real solid wide receiver. Obviously, he's already done some stuff with a guy like Caleb Williams. They've had their workouts already so far. So they kind of have that chemistry going early, even before they were drafted to Chicago together. I think what stands out on Odunze right now into this rookie year is, you said it, like, it's crowded, and he's the third guy. He really is. He's smacked down in that third slot because, I mean, a guy like Keenan Allen, although the age is up there, like he has an argument right now, in my opinion, to be the number 1 there for Caleb Williams. I think when it comes to him or DJ Moore, I'd take Allen because of that short game kind of player he kind of is. He's a target machine, and it's not always about going deep. Whereas a guy like DJ Moore, he could do both, but his specialty is really downfield. All right, let me send up a prayer and DJ Moore go get it. I think it's kind of one of those. And Odunze, it kind of does both, but he's kind of just stuck in a spot where he can't be the slot guy because both DJ Moore and Keenan Allen act as slot guys before. He could just be one of those guys that stands on the outside and kind of figure things out. I don't expect big numbers from him this year because of those two guys around him, plus Swift in the backfield, and the fact that Caleb Williams is a rookie. I mean, we can't have crazy expectations. There could be struggles here. He's still got to get used to the NFL, still got to get used to the weather, the offensive line, the offense, everything about it. A lot of people are expecting Caleb Williams to just step in and just be a darling in fantasy. I don't think it's going to turn out just like that. I think it's going to take a little bit of time. So that especially hurts a guy like Rome Odunze, who's, I would say, yeah, he's the third guy on the depth chart, Brett.
Yeah, and I think he's the third guy of those receivers in the rookie drafts as far as Neighbors and Harrison Jr. goes. That's I still probably put him ahead of Drake May. So that would probably put him right in that 5 or 6 range, depending on if you want JJ McCarthy or Rome Odunze. But I don't know that I can put a guy like Drake May ahead of him. But he's certainly ahead of, a guy like Brock Bowers or something like that. But yeah, it's probably in that, 5 or 6 range, I would say, as far as Superflex goes.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, so jumping right to the next pick as the Jets go out and make a trade at 10 to the Vikings. And it really came down to the Jets pulling, those quarterback teams. The Raiders were one of the teams. The Broncos were one of the teams. And the Vikings were one of the teams, all trying to trade up to get a quarterback. Obviously, like we heard the rumors about the Raiders and trying to go up and get Michael Penix if they couldn't get him at 13. Obviously, that didn't work out by pick 10. We weren't sure who the Broncos were going after, and then comes out afterwards that Sean Payton said, well, we were pretending to try to trade up, to try to bait another team into going up. I don't know how true that is, but it was said. Whatever the case, the Vikings go out, they make the trade, jump up one spot to get JJ McCarthy. Great landing spot. Plain and simple. Like, he has a great landing spot right away. A good trio, Jefferson, Addison, Hockenson when Hockenson comes back and is healthy. I just think that he sort of fits that role of the guy that they wanted, a guy who can be Kirk Cousins, but also can move. And I think that it's a really good spot for him. Obviously, he has sitting right behind him is going to be Aaron Jones, and I think that's an important thing too, as far as the protection goes, as far as, being able to channel into the run and not to force himself to throw the ball every time. I think that having an offensive coordinator like Kevin O'Connell, I think that that's an important thing as well. They will set this guy up for success. Obviously, he has Sam Darnold to beat out for the job. If he doesn't beat him out, he'll be in there pretty quickly, I think.
Yeah, it's fair. I mean, all great things. Things that stand out, though. Great offensive coach like Kevin O'Connell. Arguably the top receiving group in the entire NFL. He's got Jefferson and Addison plus Hockenson when he gets healthy. Plus they added Aaron Jones. Plus he has a great offensive line. I mean, just when you talk about all of that stuff, I think even more than that versus a guy like Drake May, he plays half of his games or more than half of his games in a dome, Brett, because he's going to play in Detroit also. Like, you're just adding on great things that help a rookie quarterback. And I mean, with that being said, I think he's in a great spot. I think everything about it, it's just a great situation. I think it could have been a great situation for any quarterback that would have went there. But because JJ McCarthy did, I mean, I don't see too much of a problem there. My one knock on McCarthy was his ability to get the deep ball going in games. So it may take a little bit for a guy like Addison to get on the same page as McCarthy, but he'll work on that. I just mentioned about 5 things that any rookie quarterback would be begging for coming into the NFL. So he's in a slam dunk spot right now. I think. Are you muted? Possibly.
I am muted. There you go.
There you go.
He said I think that Jordan. Sorry, I was having a choke attack here.
No problem.
I think that Jordan Addison, as far as the value goes, I think that that's stock up a little bit for him. I think they're going to have to figure each other out. Obviously, Justin Jefferson gets doubled all the time. I think it might be a little bit of a challenge right away for JJ McCarthy, and so he's going to have to figure out how can I get the ball out. I think Jordan Addison might actually have stock up at least for the beginning parts of the year till he can figure out how to get the ball into his number one receiver's hands. I also would say that Aaron Jones, it's pretty good for Aaron Jones as well, because I think that they will lean a lot into the run pretty early as far as that goes, run a lot of play action as well. But yeah, I really like the pick. And, as you said about the domes, like you mentioned it at the top of the show, like Chicago might also get a dome. And so now you're talking about everybody except Lambeau playing in a dome. I think that that's an important thing you really don't think about. And so, yeah, overall, like the JJ McCarthy landing spot, to me, he's probably a top 5 pick. He's probably the 5th of the draft. So behind Neighbors and Harrison, and then behind the other 2 quarterbacks, Daniels and Caleb. He's probably that guy, though.
Yeah, definitely agree.
All right, so jumping down the list here, we had Bo Nix go after the Jets pick Olu Fashanu at 11. They go Bo Nix at 12. And they made it known that Bo Nix actually was the guy for quite a bit. They really liked how he studied. They really liked the preparation. They really liked how they gave him an offensive playbook at like 9 o'clock at night over dinner. And then the next morning he had studied it and was able to call out the plays to them in the meeting room. And so, I kind of listen from the NFL standpoint. I think that Bo Nix is going to be this Drew Brees type project that Sean Payton takes on. I don't know if it will work out. I can't come out and say he's going to be a bust either, though. Obviously, he's been pro ready, and the styles of offense that he played in will allow him to be. I don't know that he's this top end talent, though. I just don't. I think that, like you said it before, he's a second round talent. What does that mean, though? Because we've seen second round talents actually be very good in fantasy. We saw Geno Smith, who fell to the second round, and it took a while to actually catch on, but it really took him for getting out of New York and getting to Seattle to figure out, oh, hey, this offense is built for me. I can figure it out. And, now obviously Geno's done what he's done. And so, yeah, I think that based on what Denver has on their team right now, again, it might be a little bit of a waiting period. They're probably going to lean into their running backs, I think, a bit more. They go out, they picked another one. But they kind of have this 4-headed monster at the very moment. And then, listen, they got rid of Jerry Jeudy. So what does that look like? They replaced him with Troy Franklin, his Oregon quarterback, Bo Nix. And so, interested to see how that looks. But, we're talking Cortland Sutton, Marvin Mims, and Troy Franklin. It's not exactly the top of the top as far as the receiver game goes. So, yeah, listen, I think Bo Nix will be a good quarterback. I just think that it'll take a while. I'm not sure he's going to be this quarterback 1, though, ever. If, he is, it's going to be at the very bottom, a low-end quarterback 1 at the very best.
Yeah, I can't knock a team that really needs a quarterback for drafting Bo Nix. He's going to be the starter most likely, and they're going to keep working on him. And obviously, you mentioned Sean Payton trying to make him into the next Drew Brees. I watched a lot of Bo Nix in college. He has the talent. It's about it all coming to fruition and really blossoming into a great quarterback, which that's so wait and see. There's a lot of guys that you could say, well, all right, system they're in, everything about it, even the talent that they come out with. Yeah, all right, they'll be solid. I do not know at all about Bo Nix. That's just that's a big question mark for me right now. He's got Sutton, he's got Mims, and you mentioned they drafted Troy Franklin, but it's kind of a project. So we'll see what happens.
And that said, here's my hot take of the day. I think Bo Nix is probably the 11th or 12th pick in one of those 12-team dynasty leagues. I think that there's There will be some leagues where the quarterbacks are heavy, and so yeah, he goes higher. But I think that in a pretty standard dynasty league, as far as Superflex goes, I think he falls to the very end of the first round. I think that a lot of people are very skeptical about him. And so my hot take actually is if you need a quarterback, if you need a developmental quarterback, you have two guys who are a little older, let's say Aaron Rodgers, let's say Kirk Cousins, straight into the first round for Bo Nix, because I think that the value that you're getting at the very back end of the first round to get a quarterback who's going to start right away, if he's good, that's an extreme value. If all of a sudden he's takes a year for him to catch on, it's still a really good value because that's your developmental guy. So I'm not saying go out and trade for him if you're one of those teams that is rebuilding and you really don't have any quarterback and you're just desperate for a quarterback. No, don't trade for Bo Nix because you're not going to be successful. I think that if you're one of those teams that is either contending right now, has those older quarterbacks, or right on the cusp of contending, and you could use a developmental quarterback because, we'll talk about it as we go through the season. But last season, I really honed in on, I like having three quarterbacks because you have two guys that can start every week in Superflex, and then you have a third guy who's a developmental quarterback. Probably not going to start him every week, but, he'll fill in. And for me, that was Zach Wilson. Obviously, we saw what happened with Zach Wilson, but at the same time, I had Anthony Richardson. He was the starter, Zach Wilson, and so an easy plug and play. And, you're accepting your quarterback 2 points. I think Bo Nix is a quarterback too, probably a low end, but has the potential that he could finish as one of those higher end guys if they coach him up right. So, yeah, my hot take is if you're one of those teams right on the cusp or you are contending, go look at Bo Nix or trade into the first round to grab him at the very back end of the first round.
Yeah, I was going to say my spot for him in Superflex, late first, early second. Just if he's there and you need a quarterback, I mean, you kind of have to take him there. So, but you mentioned a couple of teams could trade up. I think late first, early second is a spot for Nix right now because there's still a project there.
Yeah, fair. And again, that's why I say late first, because I think by early second, like somebody will take them. Just plain and simple, because they'll say, oh, look, there's a quarterback. Most of the teams that are picking at the top end of the second need a quarterback. And that's why they're picking at the top of the round, because, they're the worst teams in the league. And so, I think more likely than not, you have those teams that are at the 9, 10, 11, 12 spot that were likely in the semifinals, if not the finals, if not won the championship in the league. If they still own those picks, they're probably more likely to give them up, go for it again. And so, that's why I say you kind of have to look at the potential of trading up for a guy like a Bo Nix, who could be on your team for a while.
Definitely fair.
All right, so jumping right to the next pick, a guy who we thought was going to go a little bit higher in the draft. We weren't really sure. The Jet fan and me really wanted him to be on the Jets. I was happy with what they ended up doing instead, though, just based on, how it ended up shaking out. I had to judge it by the full product. At the time, though, I still wanted Brock Bowers. And the Raiders get him. Great landing spot for him, personally. However, I think this is really stock down from Michael Mayer more than anybody else. The reason is quite simple. Brock Bowers is a beast. And they went and they picked Brock Bowers that high up in the draft. I think that he becomes an immediate impact. Yes, they're going to play the 12 formation. They got two tight ends on the field. I see it. I get it. I don't know that they're going to throw it to Michael Mayer anywhere close to his amount that they're going to throw it to Brock Bowers. It's not like they have just those two guys. They also have Devontae. They also have Jacoby Myers. Yes, they done and Michael Gallup as well. I just think that Brock Bowers is going to be, option 2 behind Devontae. And then Jacoby Myers is 3. So where does that put Michael Mayer? I don't know. I think that, the Michael Mayer owners are panicking right now, and rightfully so, because I think that this was a very promising spot for him just a year ago. Now, like a nightmare.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a great landing spot in terms of just everything going on. I wouldn't be surprised if Brock Bowers ended up overcoming all the things that are happening in Vegas. But they're a run heavy offense. They have a bad quarterback situation, and he has Devontae Adams plus Jacoby Myers plus Michael Mayer right next to him. Even though the last two may not get as many targets, they're still going to get targets. So because of that, and like I said, Devontae, who's I mean, you could put him in the top 3 in the NFL easily. So because of that, it's not the greatest situation for his rookie year. Would I say things will get better? Yeah. 1,000%. I think they'll end up getting a quarterback at some point that fits them, and you got a really, really solid tight end for the next decade or so. And I think he's a really talented player who can blossom in the NFL. He's an NFL ready tight end. He proved that at Georgia, and he proved that through his college career. But his rookie year, I'm a little shaky on it because of all the situation. Like I said, bad quarterback, one heavy offense, and he's got so many targets next to him. It's not great, but I'd take him probably just after a guy like Rome Odunze in that next stretch of guys. He would probably be in my mind.
I think this pick said a few things. I think it said, number one, they really, really wanted Michael Penix, and that actually was true. I think that they went best player available on here. It wasn't a need for them, obviously, because they had a tight end. And so, yeah, to me, that really says they wanted to get Penix, and all the stuff that was out there about them. That was true. I also think that the people of Las Vegas are growing out their trucker mustaches with their handlebars, and they're getting their jean shorts ready because Gardner Minshew is coming to town. Gardner was really, really good last year. And I think that actually is what is going to make a Brock Bowers successful. Mo Alley-Cox was successful last year. Didn't really see that coming. And so, to me, I think that, again, Gardner Minshew is going to be the guy over Aiden O'Connell. I know that it's kind of back and forth right now, but get your G shorts ready, grow out your mustaches, because Gardner Mania is coming, and so I think that's run wild on the city of Las Vegas.
Get your jorts ready, Brett.
Yeah, baby, we're ready.
All right, next.
So so jumping down the list, I could talk Gardner all day long. Jumping down the list, it was a run on defensive guys. We didn't see our next fantasy relevant player picked until pick number 23. Jacksonville goes out. They pick Brian Thomas Jr. Zach, it was an interesting spot right when the pick was made because it was, okay, well, he's going to have to compete with Zay Jones. He's going to have to compete with Christian Kirk. He's going to have to compete with Evan Ingram. He's going to have to compete with Travis Etienne. All of a sudden, they go out after the weekend is over, and they just outright cut Zay Jones. So now, with all of that said, I think that this is a pretty interesting pick. I don't know that it's going to be an amazing pick right out of the gate. As we saw with the Tank Bigsby, I think that cutting Zay Jones actually is a stock up for Christian Kirk because he is the, without a doubt, number one guy. That said, I think that Brian Thomas Jr. is going to slide in a lot of drafts to the second round, probably. And I think he's a good value at that spot. Listen, I think that to have Trevor Lawrence as your quarterback is very, very good. Gabe Davis is there. We saw Gabe Davis and what Gabe Davis does. Like, he disappears. I think that having a Brian Thomas Jr., obviously we talked about the size, the speed of Thomas. I think that actually pushes him ahead of Gabe Davis. So he could end up being the number 2 guy here.
One of the biggest sleepers on my board, Brett, because of just the talent that he has to offer. And we saw him at LSU last year behind Malik Neighbors. Malik Neighbors is not there. Yeah, it's Brian Thomas's show. So I think because of that, the talent he has, the size he has, everything he can do, I mean, this guy's a sleeper because I think he can boom once he gets the chemistry going with his quarterback. If all goes to plan and they just keep going with their thing, obviously they cut Zay Jones. Yes, they have the other 2 there. If he gets a chemistry going, this could be a real strong duo in just a couple of years. So he's a big sleeper on my board, Brett. I really like the landing spot for Brian Thomas, and I don't think he's getting nearly as much attention for the talent he has to offer.
Yeah, I agree. I think that when we talked about the LSU connection, and one of them was Jamar Chase, and the other one was Odell Beckham Jr., and that was our comps that we had for these guys. I love the pick. I just think that as far as the skill set, you can go check out our previews. Like, we were in on this guy. We thought this guy was going to be very good in the NFL. He ends up going to a pretty good situation, especially now with Zay Jones out there. And so, like I said, Gabe Davis, we know what Gabe Davis is. Gabe Davis disappears, and he disappeared with one of the top quarterbacks in the entire league as number 2 option behind Stephon Diggs. And so, I think that there's a really high potential here for Brian Thomas to have success pretty early.
Agreed.
All right, so we jump a few picks later, and it was Buffalo on the clock, and they needed a receiver, and everybody was like, oh, well, here we go. Here comes the big receiver. And then they trade the pick, and they trade it to no one other than their arch rivals, the Kansas City Chiefs, who keep one-up them every year. They can't get past them, and they just gifted them one of the most talented receivers in this entire draft, Xavier Worthy. Zach, I love Xavier Worthy, and you could go back to that preview that we were just talking about. Like, I love Xavier Worthy. We got to see him play in person. I so desperately wanted him to go to a situation where he can be the guy. This is that situation. He goes to the Kansas City Chiefs. We obviously know Rashee Rice, something's going on because they used the first-round pick on the receiver. They traded up to get that guy, so they obviously valued him enough to go over San Francisco, to go up and over Buffalo and get that guy, and Carolina as well. Like, I think that there were a couple teams that were trying to trade into the back end of the draft, of the first round, I should say. Kansas City needed to beat those teams out. They went and they did it. And so, listen, am I saying Xavier Worthy's going to be some like superstar? No, I'm not saying that by any means. But doesn't he kind of remind you of this like Tyreek Hill speed now going to play with Patrick Mahomes? Like, I just think that the potential of him turning out like that is pretty, I'd say, high. Now, listen, the floor could drop out from under him. Patty Mahomes could use Travis Kelce, who just signed a 2-year extension, and keep throwing to him. And then sort of they figure out, okay, well, the Chiefs don't have anyone else to defend except for Kelce, so let's double Worthy with our corners. Could happen. I don't know how that'll react because we haven't seen Xavier Worthy get doubled in the NFL. Just haven't. And obviously, he's not a Marvin Harrison Jr., so, I don't know if he can make it work. But I guess we're going to find out, right? And that's the exciting part about this pick. I think that Worthy himself has probably leapfrogged himself from what was probably a second rounder to he's right there at pick like 8. Like, I think that to me is the most significant jump that we've seen of anybody other than JJ McCarthy. I just think that he's leapfrogged himself probably into the 8 guy.
1000% agree with you. I think Xavier Worthy right now probably sits right next to Rome Odunze and Brock Bowers in that next tier that I talked about, behind all the quarterbacks go. And he is right slam dunk in between those guys. And I think what you said, you were like, oh, well, all right, we could see him going to the Chiefs. This is the typical Kansas City Chief wide receiver. I mean, it's Xavier Worthy. We talked about it when we talked about the wide receivers a couple episodes. He is a typical Kansas City Chief. I think everything about it, he fits in the system. He could be a gadget player. He can run around so fast, 8 million miles an hour. I think like just everything about him, he is going to succeed one way or another in Kansas City. He's got the ability, he's got the speed. Even though he's small, he runs through everybody. They're gonna try and make him into the next Tyreek Hill, and Buffalo handed it to him on a platter. It's just going to be stuck in Bills heads fans because I think Xavier Worthy is going to be a really good pro, and I think he's clearly in the best situation of that next tier of wide receivers. It's not even close, and that's why he's pushed up into the first round, like you said, Brett.
Yeah, I just think that the potential of being a Tyreek Hill and working himself from a fantasy point as far as those bombs, like we would see those bombs go up, and there is no MVS to catch. I think this is a guy who actually could catch those bombs. We saw it in college and him getting down the field really, really quickly. He had a quarterback underthrew him a ton. That's not going to happen anymore. He's not going to have the Quinn Ewers underthrow. He's going to have a Patty Mahomes bullet that goes right to him. And I think that that's the most important part of it. We will see a ton of bombs this year from Xavier Worthy and Patty Mahomes.
1000%.
All right, so we jump a few picks later than that. San Francisco on the clock. A lot of rumors about them trading Debo this weekend didn't come to fruition. A lot of rumors about them trading Brandon Ayuk this weekend didn't come to fruition. Still might happen. Don't know if it's going to happen right away. Don't know if there were conversations that'll be explored through the summer before training camps open. You can be sure, though, one of them won't be on the team a year from now when we approach next season. And that was because they took a first-round wide receiver here in Ricky Purcell. And to me, I think that speaks the most volumes because the unknown of the San Francisco offense as far as the receiver game, I really don't know where to peg these guys. I mean, listen, as far as Brandon Ayuk's fantasy value right now, I'd say he's probably a high-end wide receiver too still. I think that Debo has fallen off the beaten path. I honestly, if I had to pick between the two and I was the GM of the 49ers, I would send Debo out because I think Ayuk is more talented. I think Debo has sort of had his, swan song, and it's kind of done now. If I'm being honest, like brutally honest. But I think that Brandon Ayuk is the more talented guy. That said, Ricky Purcell is going to have, targets because he's the guy in that offense and they like to rotate the receivers a ton. So, yeah, he'll get work, but I don't know that this is a guy that's going to get a ton of fantasy points right away. I don't know that it's fair to say that. And so, for me, probably, early to mid second rounder. Again, I don't know. Just think that there's going to be a lot of log jam for him pretty early on before the stuff opens up. By the time that the stuff opens up, I don't know that he's even going to be the guy there because they could go out and go get somebody else because they're going for another Super Bowl. I'm unsure of it. And I get using a first rounder on a wide receiver is something that they definitely could have used, especially with a lot of the rumors coming out of this past weekend. But, not a lot of mock drafts had Ricky going in the first round and warranted.
Agreed. So I'll say it flat out. I think he's a late second rounder right now with the situation that he's in. Just completely, he's a late second rounder because of obviously Debo and Ayuk, but because of that, and they're probably not going anywhere. It seems this year before this season started. Maybe that could change mid-season, or it can change heading into next season. But for right now, if they are still there, it's basically like a redshirt year. He's playing the Jawan Jennings role. Like maybe you get 1 target, 2 targets a game, and you call it. So because of that, he's a late second rounder just because he's not going to have an impact right away. And you saw that with the Ayuk and Debo situation. I agree with you quickly on that situation. I think it's Debo who's out the door, and it's not even because like I think it's just fallen off like his football talent. I think his body is just broken down, or it's going to break down even more because of just how he plays. He's small and he's a running back basically, but he's a small kind of running back. So his shoulders, he's digging into guys. He can't handle that. He gets shoulder injuries every 2 plays. So because of that, Ayuk is going to be the longer pro. I think Debo, how his body's going, he might have 2 more years and that's it in the NFL. So because of that, I think he'll probably be the one out the door. If he doesn't get injured before then, and his career's done. That's just the reality of the situation. But Purcell, it's kind of right now it's a redshirt year because I mean you're not taking him over any of those 2 plus Kittle plus they're in a run heavy offense with McCaffrey. It's just not gonna work out. So he drops down a lot of rookie draft boards and rightfully so here.
Yeah, I just think that, again, it's a logjam. And so, yeah, I said mid second round, early to mid second round. I just think that there will be a team that says, oh, he's a first rounder, I'm going to go grab him. And so I don't know that I would be the team that would pick him with that early second rounder, but, I digress. So we jump right to the next pick here. Our final pick of the first round. Zach, there was a trade by the Buffalo Bills. Yet again, they drop a spot. So they give up the potential of a 5th-year option on their pick, which we figured would be a receiver. It ended up being a receiver in Keon Coleman. But it was the Carolina Panthers who traded up. And this guy that they ended up picking, Xavier Legette, said pretty honestly about a week before the draft that they had told him he was going to be a Carolina Panther, the South Carolina grad. And, David Tepper had assured him he would be a Panther. Now, obviously, David Tepper and the antics from the past weekend with the sign and let the GM pick and let the coach pick. I don't know if he did. If he didn't, I don't know what the deal was. But what I do know is Xavier Legette ends up going to a pretty good situation, I would say, in Carolina. I just think that as far as it goes with, depth chart wise, like obviously, yes, he has Adam Thielen sitting there. Yes, they bring in Deontay Johnson over the offseason, but I think he could beat out Jonathan Mingo. I think he could beat out Terrence Marshall Jr. So he's probably the number 3 guy right now. Is he going to be an immediate impact? Maybe. I think that he'll be a slot guy, but they also went out and they got Jatavius Sanders. And so is he going to clog up the middle? I don't know that this is going to be an immediate impact for him. I think it might take a year. Adam Thielen is out. If not, it'll take towards the end of the year for him to come on. But I think that the potential for Legette to be successful, is there. Obviously, he has a young quarterback there. I think that this actually, for more than anybody, it's stock up for Bryce Young because it gives Bryce Young another nice weapon. They did a really good job of surrounding him with talent. Obviously, I just said it. They brought Deontay Johnson in. They go out and they obviously they pick Legette. They pick Jatavius Sanders. They pick Jonathan Brooks, who we'll talk about also on the next episode. So they kind of just surrounded him with a ton of talent. I think it's back up here for Bryce Young. I think Bryce Young is actually a very good buy low candidate right now in Dynasty.
Yeah, definitely fair. I think right now, though, with Xavier Legette, I would say probably mid to late round 2. That's probably where I'd put him. We kind of had that stretch last year. I ended up getting a guy like Rashee Rice out of that. No big deal. But like guys like Rashee Rice, Jaden Reed, Marvin Mims, where they were mid to late second round, I think there's just going to be that stretch of running backs and wide receivers, and they're just all going to go right there. Take your pick on them. So that's kind of where I see a guy in Legette because just because it's just so crowded there, Red. It's so crowded. And although, yeah, it could be fine his rookie year, I don't see this being a thing until like a couple years from now as he builds chemistry with Bryce Young and eventually in the future it could be a top weapon for him. There's just so many guys there right now. Plus, I feel like they're probably not going to put as much pressure on Bryce Young. He's young. He's still learning. Yes, it was his rookie year. They'll be looking for a jump, but they're not going to get a huge jump that they're just going to go all out throwing the ball. He's got 3 weapons that could think they're right there. Thielen, Johnson, and now Legette. So because of that, I'm going to pause just for this year. He could boom, but I doubt it's going to happen. But a guy to hold on to, and then especially if you have Bryce Young, that's a great pick. You build that stack for future years. I think Legette could be a real good player. I don't see it right now, so I think that drops his value, especially in Superflex.
Yeah, I agree. I think later second round might be the spot. Mid to late second round. Obviously, you're talking about a first round pick, so there will be somebody that tries to get him. So if you do want him, you probably have to target him in that middle of the second round before he goes. But yeah, his actual value is probably closer towards the end of that second round. I'd probably even say that he sort of reminds me of kind of the situation that Malachi Corley finds himself in of the New York Jets, where it's just very crowded. It's a guy who came on to college very late. It really took him 4.5 years to figure it out, Legette. And so, he popped on his 5th year. And so I don't know that he's going to pop right away. I don't know that he's going to pop at all. We don't really know. Obviously, still developmental quarterback situation with Bryce Young. And so a little bit crowded there. And like I said, added a bunch of weapons in addition to Legette. And so how do those guys get used, I think is an important thing here as well. So yeah, it's very boomer bust. And to me, that's what drops him to the back end of the second round, I would say.
Yeah, definitely fair.
All right. So we hit the end of round 1. The Buffalo Bills did not get to make a pick until the very first pick of round 2. We're going to break down the rest of this draft, day 2 picks and day 3 picks in the next one. Zach, any quick little preview that you might want to give of any guy who may have caught your eye?
Well, I think a big guy right now is Jonathan Brooks, who went to the Carolina Panthers, and a lot of people are high on him. We'll kind of see our opinions on it, Brett. Obviously, a solid situation, 2 questionable running backs next to him. Could he be the top guy? We'll wait to find out.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty interesting situation there. Also, another guy who I think that kind of caught my eye a little bit just based on the landing spot was Roman Wilson. Going to the Steelers, nice little situation he has there. It's George Pickens. Obviously, I just said that Deontay Johnson goes to Carolina, and so Roman kind of fills in as that number 2 guy. And so curious to hear your thoughts on that as well. Make sure that you check out the rest of our episodes as we did our previews. We did a lot of deep dives into some of the prospects before their landing spots. Obviously, today we hit day 1. Our episode in just a few short days, if not a week, we'll cover the rest of the draft. But before that, please subscribe. darkest before the dawn, we shall rise yet again. For Zach Malamed, I am Matt Malamed. This has been the Third Round Reversal Fantasy Football Podcast. We'll catch you on the next one.